Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It happened in the early fall of 2019 in a small town just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. The kind of town where the Dollar Tree was more than just a discount store, it was part of the community's daily rhythm. The place was tucked between a shuttered gas station and a rundown laundromat, its faded green sign always flickering, always buzzing. Maggie was a part-time college student working evening shifts to make some extra money. She liked how slow the store got after 8 p.m. Just her, the stockroom guy, and the night manager, a quiet older woman named Charlene, who never said much beyond what needed to be done. Maggie usually closed the registers by 9:30 and helped clean up before heading out at 10. Most nights were uneventful. But then, the delivery started coming late. The store began receiving strange, unmarked boxes, sometimes without shipping labels. They'd just show up, stacked near the back door despite no one seeing a truck arrive. They weren't on the inventory list, and Charlene would just say, "Corporate must have changed something," even though she never opened the boxes in front of anyone. Maggie didn't think much of it at first. Weird stuff happened in retail all the time. Then came the smell. It was subtle at first, like sour meat or moldy rags, but it hung in the air, especially near the toy aisle. Maggie started noticing that certain dolls had gone missing. Then, a few would reappear the next day, but they looked off. The eyes were slightly misaligned, like they had been tampered with. One had a red smear on its plastic dress that looked a lot like dried blood. Another had what looked like human hair sewn into its scalp. Maggie told Charlene, but she just shrugged, saying, "Kids must have messed with them." One night, around 9:15, the power flickered while Maggie was stocking shelves. The overhead lights snapped off and the emergency lights bathed the aisles in a pale red glow. From the far end of the store, near the seasonal section, she heard soft laughter, childlike but slow and deliberate, like someone mocking a child's voice. She froze. "Hello?" she called out, but no one answered. Her footsteps echoed down the linoleum as she walked toward the back. She thought it might be a prank. Maybe someone had stayed in the store after closing, but the aisles were empty. Then she saw the toys. They were all lined up in the middle of the floor, facing her. A dozen plastic baby dolls, identical, with cracked faces and stitched up mouths. They hadn't been there a minute ago. Her heart started pounding. She picked one up. It was ice cold. The eyes had been scraped out. She turned to run to the front, but the aisle had changed. It wasn't possible, but the layout was different. Wrong. Where the cleaning supplies should have been, there were rows of old shelves, covered in cobwebs and faded price tags for items the store hadn't sold in years. The walls looked decayed, stained, and crumbling like they belonged to a building long abandoned. She shouted for Charlene, but no one answered. Panicked, she darted through the aisles, trying to reach the front of the store. But the front was gone. The sliding doors had vanished, replaced by a black wall that pulsed like it was breathing. Behind her, the sound of tiny feet pitter-pattered against the linoleum. She didn't look back. Instead, she burst into the stockroom, hoping to find a way out through the back exit. That's when she saw Charlene. The manager was on her knees in front of one of the unmarked boxes, chanting something under her breath in a language Maggie couldn't recognize. Her hands were slick with blood, and the inside of the box moved, like something alive was inside, struggling against the cardboard. Charlene turned slowly, her eyes all black, her mouth too wide, stretching far past what was humanly possible. She smiled. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," she said, voice layered with something else, something ancient. Maggie ran. She crashed through the emergency exit, setting off the alarm. The night air hit her like a slap, and she didn't stop until she reached the empty parking lot. When she looked back, the Dollar Tree was dark, silent. The alarm wasn't blaring anymore. The police arrived an hour later. The store was open again, brightly lit and fully staffed. They found nothing. No blood, no weird boxes, no Charlene. The manager on duty claimed Maggie had left hours ago and must have been confused. The security cameras had malfunctioned. Maggie never went back, not even to pick up her final paycheck. 6 months later, the Dollar Tree burned down in what the fire department called a structural failure. No one was hurt. No bodies were found. But in the ashes, investigators found a partially melted plastic doll. Its eyes were missing, its mouth was stitched shut, and human hair was fused to the scalp.
Story number 2.
It was just past closing time at the Dollar Tree on the edge of town. The fluorescent lights flickered unevenly as Emma, a part-time clerk, was finishing her nightly stock check. She'd worked there for almost a year, and though the place was small and usually slow, she never felt truly alone. Until tonight. Emma had been shelving a row of cheap plastic toys near the back of the store when she heard a faint shuffling sound behind her. Thinking it was just a customer who had forgotten something, she called out softly, "Hello? We're closed now." No response. When she turned around, the aisle was empty. Unease crept in as she resumed her work. But then the overhead lights dimmed suddenly, plunging the store into an eerie half-darkness. Her heart raced. She grabbed her phone to check the time, 11:47 p.m., and the battery was dead. That didn't make sense. She'd charged it fully before her shift. The shuffling came again, closer this time. She froze. The sound wasn't footsteps. It was more like scraping, like nails dragged across the cheap linoleum floor. Her breath caught as a whisper echoed through the aisles, barely audible, saying, "Don't leave." Emma's eyes darted to the front of the store. The exit doors, normally locked at this hour, were wide open, swaying slightly as if someone had pushed them. But she hadn't heard a door open. Panicking, she grabbed a metal broomstick from the cleaning supplies and crept toward the exit. The store felt colder than usual, and the flickering lights made long distortos dance along the walls. Then she saw it, a figure, pale and gaunt, standing just beyond the automatic doors, staring at her with hollow eyes. Emma took a step back. The figure didn't move but whispered again, "You shouldn't be here." Suddenly, every sound in the store went silent except for the faint crackling of a static radio somewhere in the back room. The aisles twisted and warped in her vision, and the cheap plastic toys around her seemed to shift unnaturally. A doll's head slowly turned its eyes to follow her. Desperate, Emma dashed to the back exit, only to find it sealed shut. The whispering voices grew louder, overlapping, chanting something she couldn't understand but felt deep in her bones. Her phone flickered on, showing a message on the screen. "Help me." The message was from her own number. The lights went out completely, and in the darkness, Emma felt cold hands grip her wrists. She screamed, but the store swallowed the sound. The next morning, the manager found the Dollar Tree locked tight, lights off, with no sign of Emma anywhere. Security footage was wiped clean, except for a brief moment at 11:47 p.m., where the camera showed a shadowy figure standing motionless near the toys, watching the empty aisles. Emma was never seen again. And the Dollar Tree? It remains open, but employees say sometimes after closing, you can still hear whispering and footsteps long after the doors are locked, warning anyone who stays too late to never ignore the voices inside.
Story number 3.
There was a Dollar Tree store on the edge of a small town, the kind of place everyone said was just off. It sat in a strip mall with flickering neon signs and cracked pavement, always seeming a bit colder than the rest of the town. People shopped there out of necessity, cheap snacks, cleaning supplies, party favors, but nobody ever stayed long. Most employees didn't last a full month before quitting without explanation. One chilly October evening, a young woman named Emily took a part-time job there. She needed the money and figured it would be easy work, stocking shelves, ringing up customers, sweeping the floor. The first few days passed quietly, but the weirdness started on her third night. Around 9 p.m., the store emptied, except for Emily and the night manager, an older man named Jerry who never really smiled. As she restocked the candy aisle, she heard faint whispers. At first, she thought it was just the hum of the fluorescent lights or maybe a customer murmuring at the counter. But the voices grew clearer, soft, unintelligible, like a dozen people whispering secrets right behind the walls. Emily shook it off as her imagination. Then, while folding a display of cheap Halloween decorations, she noticed something odd. One of the plastic skeletons was missing its skull. She looked around, but the other skeletons were intact. Curious, she went to grab a replacement from the back room. When she returned, the skeleton was back on the shelf, skull perfectly in place. But now a small, hand-drawn smile was carved into the plastic jaw. She hadn't touched it. her heart started racing. That night, the security cameras kept glitching. Jerry was frustrated, tapping the monitors, swearing under his breath about that damn store. Emily asked what was wrong, but he just shook his head and muttered something about things that shouldn't be caught on tape. The glitches always seemed to happen near the toy aisle. Late into her shift, Emily felt eyes on her. She turned to see a shadow flicker past the glass doors, someone standing outside, though no one should have been there. When she looked again, the figure was gone. She called Jerry over, but he just told her not to worry, said people played pranks sometimes. Yet Jerry looked pale. As the night dragged on, the whispers got louder, filling every aisle, echoing off the cheap linoleum floors. Emily felt like invisible hands brushed her arms, tugged at her jacket, cold breath on her neck. When she tried to tell Jerry, he told her to focus on her work and keep calm. Around 2 a.m., Emily found herself near the back storage room. She heard what sounded like crying, low, mournful sobs from inside the locked door. She knocked, but no one answered. The sobbing stopped abruptly. Then came a slow, rattling breath, like someone just outside the door, watching. Summoning every bit of courage, Emily grabbed a screwdriver and forced the lock open. The room was empty, filled only with dusty boxes of clearance items and broken furniture. But on the far wall, scrawled in what looked like red marker, or maybe something darker, was a message: "Don't leave." A cold wind blew through the room despite the door closing tightly behind her. The lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging her into darkness. The whispers turned into screams. Emily scrambled toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own, trapping her inside. She pounded the door, screaming for Jerry or anyone to help. Her phone had no signal inside the building, and the emergency alarm wouldn't work. The air grew thick, heavy with something unseen pressing down on her chest. Suddenly, the light snapped back on. Jerry was standing outside the door, face pale but calm. "You shouldn't have opened that," he said softly. "They don't like it when you try to leave." Emily fled the store that night, quitting immediately. She later found out that every employee who had disappeared from the Dollar Tree over the last few years had last been seen near that storage room. Rumors whispered of a dark presence trapped beneath the store, feeding on fear, slowly trapping souls in the aisles among the cheap merchandise. No one ever stayed long at that Dollar Tree, and those who did, those who vanished, were never seen again, except in the flickering shadows, where something waits patiently for the next customer to wander too close.